If there's one thing the third season of Bridgerton left us with, it's definitely controversy. Whether it's the changes in the storyline, the lack of romance in the plot, Benedict's sexuality, and so on. But to be honest, what caused the most outrage was the appearance of the character Michaela Stirling, as she comes to radically change the entire story of Francesca Bridgerton. And for those who are not familiar with the books, let me give you some context. Bridgerton is based on a saga of 9 books, each one telling the story of one sibling, except for the last one, which is a compilation of alternate endings for all the stories. And just as each book is starred by a Bridgerton in the series, each season will be starred by one sibling. People who have read the books already have an idea of how the plot of each one goes, who the love interest will be, how they end, and so on. As a reader, it is quite exciting to see these stories come to life with real people. Keeping this in mind, it's normal that we usually hold certain expectations about what we hope to see. And let's say we are aware, or at least I am speaking for myself, that they can't adapt the books word for word, that the screenwriters need to take certain liberties and change one or another detail of the original story to portray it correctly on screen. Now, remember there are 8 siblings and we are only on the 3rd season, so there are 5 more stories to adapt, among them Francesca's. Francesca is the 5th sister in the family and has a rather unique story. Unlike her siblings, who marry and experience love for the first time, in her book, Francesca faces grief as she loses the love of her life just 2 years after marrying him. John and Francesca meet and fall in love almost immediately. In the books, we are not given many details about how this happens, but it is made quite clear that she was truly in love with John and that, like in the series, she felt different from her other siblings and leaving home had been a relief for her. Let's say the Bridgertons were a family known for being quite popular in London. All of them charismatic and charming, they tended to stand out in the crowd thanks to their enigmatic personalities. And Francesca, although as beautiful as her siblings, preferred not to draw attention. And although she loved her siblings, she felt that somehow she didn't fit in with them. So, when she met John and saw the opportunity to escape that noisy house, she took it without hesitation. After marrying, Francesca and John moved to Scotland as John, who was the Earl of Kilmartin, had all his properties there. In Scotland, Francesca met Michael, who was John's cousin, almost like a brother. And I say almost like a brother because they were raised together since their parents were twins. Michael fell in love with Francesca at first sight, but being she was his cousin's wife, he decided to keep his feelings to himself, and he did so for 2 years, or well, more than that. But 2 years later, something happened that would determine their future, and that was John's death, who died unexpectedly. In the 2 years that Francesca had been living in Scotland, she and Michael had developed a close friendship, so she thought she would find support in him, especially after losing the baby she was expecting. But scared by his feelings and devastated by his cousin's death, Michael decided that the best thing would be to distance himself and wait for his feelings for Francesca to disappear over time, which clearly did not happen. 2 years later, when he returned to London, he found that Francesca had finished her mourning and was ready to remarry, as she wanted to have a child. And from here, the most relevant events of this story unfold, which is the love story between Michael and Francesca, this being the main plot. Now, as you know, in the 3rd season, we were introduced to a character who doesn't exist in the books, and that is Michaela Stirling. And I say doesn't exist because, as I already explained, Francesca's love interest in the saga is Michael, who is a man, not a woman. Does this change things? Of course, it changes things. Let's say the screenwriters could try to follow the original storyline and respect the most relevant aspects of the plot, like John's death. But there will be other aspects that cannot continue with such a significant change as this. And I don't want this to be misunderstood. Yes, a love story between 2 women can be made. What cannot be done is to follow the original essence of the story in the same way. In the books, Francesca's main motivation to remarry is to have a child. In the series, they will handle several issues simultaneously in one story, from presenting an LGBTQ+ story in the Regency era, where this was not accepted by society, to seeing Francesca go through John's grief, and her process of recognizing and accepting her sexual orientation, something that is already complicated to portray correctly in a current story. So, if they decided to respect this part of Francesca's story and her desire to be a mother, it would be another issue to address in the story, with all that this implies. So for me, this plot won't happen, or at least not in the same way. On the other hand, I don't know why something tells me that John might not die. It would be quite easy for the screenwriters to let Francesca simply decide to separate from him because she realizes she doesn't like men. After all, they already changed the protagonist. One more change won't hurt anyone. So instead of encountering a story of loss, pain, and grief, we could see a story of struggle, overcoming, and empowerment in an era where these types of stories were quite scarce, or, well, not scarce, but rather well hidden. Now, if the screenwriters decided to respect Francesca's wish from the books of wanting children, two things could happen. After John's death, Francesca wouldn't lose her pregnancy, would have the baby, and raise it with Michaela. Or, somehow, they would adopt someone else's child. There is another determining factor in this story that I am curious to know how they will handle, and that is marriage. We know that Bridgerton is a series about, among other things, romance, and that its main plot revolves around a couple falling in love until they finally get married. What would happen, in this sense, in the case of Francesca and Michaela? In my opinion, we could simply see them remain in a free union, unable or unwilling to get married, which could be a way to have them rebel against high society standards. Or Queen Charlotte, who we remember was enchanted by Francesca, could be moved by their relationship and decide to approve the union between LGBTQ couples. In any case, Francesca and Michaela's story is here to change what we knew about the series, despite the fact that it already presented significant changes compared to the reality. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you want to know Francesca and Michael's story according to the books, remember Michael, not Michaela. I'll leave the link above for you to check it out. If you enjoy this kind of content, the best way to support the channel is by leaving a like, subscribing, and hitting the notification bell. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.